They say pride is the most expensive mistake a person can make. Not the kind of pride that builds you up, the kind that blinds you. The kind that makes you look at another human being and decide, without knowing a single thing about them, that they are beneath you, that their life, their story,
Look at
their
that
dignity,
mess.
none of it matters.
She
That you can do
completely
whatever you
ruined
want
it.
of them and walk away without consequence.
What an
Most people who
idiot.
carry that kind of pride never get the moment of reckoning they deserve. But on one Thursday evening in downtown Houston, Texas, inside the gleaming atrium of one of the most powerful companies in the state, a woman named Brianna Hartwell picked up a glass of red wine and poured it, slowly and deliberately, over the head of an old woman she assumed was just the janitor. She laughed when she did it. And in that single moment, she destroyed everything she had spent years building because the woman standing there, drenched in Cabernet Sauvignon, holding a mop, owned the building, owned the company, owned everything Brianna had ever wanted. And she had no idea. Before we go any further into this story, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now let's get into this. Gloria Ann Hartwell was born in 1950 in Beaumont, Texas, the second of 6 children raised in a 2-bedroom house on a street where nobody had very much, but everybody knew everybody. Her father, Earl Hartwell, worked the refineries. Her mother, June, cleaned houses during the week and sang in the church choir on Sunday mornings. There was never extra money. There was never a safety net. What there was a mother who told her children every single night before bed that no matter what this world gives you or takes from you, nobody can ever take your dignity unless you hand it to them. Gloria heard that every night for 18 years, and she never forgot it. Not once. Not even on the hardest days. Not even when the world gave her plenty of reasons to. She carried those words with her like a compass through every chapter of her life. And there were many chapters, most of them difficult, all of them real. She graduated high school in 1968 and immediately went to work. There was no money for college, no scholarships that materialized, no relatives who could help. She got a job at a manufacturing supply company in Beaumont, answering phones and filing invoices. She was 22 when she started taking night classes in business administration at a community college 40 minutes from her apartment. She paid for those classes herself, one semester at a time, working double shifts when she had to. She was not the fastest student in the room. She was not the most naturally gifted. But every single instructor she ever had said the same thing about Gloria Hartwell. She was the most relentlessly focused person they had ever taught. She did not waste a single lesson. She asked questions until she understood. She took notes by hand and rewrote them at home before she went to sleep. She treated every class like it was the last one she would ever get, because some part of her knew that for a woman like her, in a time like that, it very well might be. By the time she was 30, Gloria had worked her way up to operations supervisor at the same supply company where she had started answering phones 8 years earlier. She understood the business from the ground up, not theoretically, not from a textbook, but from living inside it every day. She knew how the loading docks worked. She knew how the inventory systems broke down and why. She knew which vendors were reliable and which ones would leave you short on a Friday afternoon when you had a Monday deadline. She knew the business the way you only know something when you have touched every part of it with your own hands. And she knew, by the time she was 32, that she could run a better version of it herself. In 1984, with a loan she spent 3 years trying to get approved and a rented warehouse on the outskirts of Houston, Gloria Hartwell launched Hartwell Industrial Group. Her first product line was machine components, custom fabricated parts for oil field equipment. Her first big client took 14 months to land. She remembers sitting in a waiting room for that first meeting, wearing her best blazer, a second-hand one she had pressed 3 times that morning, and reminding herself of what her mother used to say. Nobody can take your dignity unless you hand it to them. She did not hand it to anyone that day. She walked in, made her case, and left with a contract. It was not a large contract, but it was a start. And for Gloria Hartwell, a start was all she had ever needed. By 1995, Hartwell Industrial had grown to over 300 employees across 2 facilities. By 2002, they were operating in 7 states with government and private sector contracts that made the company one of the most quietly powerful industrial suppliers in the American South. Gloria never took the company public. She never sold a controlling share. She built it the way she built everything slowly, carefully, with full control and no shortcuts. By the time the story we are telling today takes place, Hartwell Industrial Group employed more than 4,000 people across 12 states and carried a valuation of just over $4 billion. And almost none of the people who walked past Gloria Hartwell on the street would have guessed any of it. Because Gloria did not look the part. She had never cared about looking the part. She drove a 5-year-old Buick. She ate lunch in the company cafeteria when she visited headquarters. She knew the name of every security guard, every custodian, every cafeteria worker in every building she owned. She learned their names deliberately, on purpose, because she believed that the character of a company was not measured by its balance sheet, but by how the person at the top treated the person at the bottom. She had been the person at the bottom. She had never forgotten what it felt like. And she refused, no matter how large her company grew or how many zeros appeared at the end of her net worth, to become the kind of person who forgot. That stubbornness, that deliberate, quiet insistence on staying connected to the ground floor of her own organization was something her attorney, Raymond Okafor, admired deeply and worried about constantly. Because Gloria had a habit that Raymond considered, depending on the day, either brilliant or reckless. Every few months, without warning, without security, without any announcement at all, Gloria Hartwell would put on plain work clothes and walk through her own buildings. She wanted to see what was really happening when people thought the boss was not watching. She called it staying honest. Raymond called it a liability waiting to happen. And in the fall of the year this story takes place, Raymond turned out to be right, though not in the way he had feared. Now, to understand what happened at that gala, you have to understand Donna Fields first. Because Donna is not a side character in this story. Donna is, in many ways, the moral center of it. Donna Fields had worked at Hartwell Industrial's Houston headquarters for 19 years by the time we arrive at the events of October. She had come to the company in her late 30s after a difficult divorce left her raising 2 children on her own in the Acres Homes neighborhood of Northwest Houston. She applied for a custodial position, got it, and showed up every single day for 19 years without complaint and without fail. She knew every hallway, every supply closet, every quirk of every floor in that building. She remembered which executives liked which brand of coffee, which conference rooms had faulty air vents, and which members of the cleaning crew were going through hard times and needed a kind word at the start of a shift. Donna was the kind of person who made a workplace feel like a community simply by being present in it. And she had an easy warmth about her that drew people in, the kind of warmth that does not need status or a title to communicate that you are safe and seen and welcome. The first time Gloria had walked those halls in disguise, about 5 years before the gala, she had sat down in the break room on the ground floor with a sandwich and a cup of coffee and nobody to talk to. It was Donna who sat down across from her, uninvited and unassuming, and asked how she was settling in. Gloria had told her she was just doing some contract work. Donna did not push further. She just talked to her about her grandchildren, about the Houston Texans, about the best lunch spots within walking distance. It was the most genuinely human conversation Gloria had experienced inside that building in years. And from that day forward, the two women had a quiet, real friendship that existed entirely below the surface of the company's organizational chart. Gloria knew Donna's grandchildren's names. Donna knew that Gloria liked her coffee black and her stories straight with no sugarcoating. They were friends. Quietly and genuinely, they were friends. Which means that when Brianna Hartwell began appearing regularly in that building, Gloria did not hear about what was happening from a formal report or a human resources complaint. She heard about it from Donna. And what Donna described made something harden inside Gloria Hartwell that had not hardened in a very long time. Brianna had grown up in Scottsdale, Arizona, in the kind of household that was comfortable enough to create expectations, but not wealthy enough to guarantee them. Her father worked in commercial real estate. Her mother managed a boutique. They lived well by most standards. But Brianna grew up with a clear and early understanding that the life she wanted, the one she saw in certain magazines and certain neighborhoods and certain social circles, was going to require strategy to reach. And Brianna was, by every measure, a strategist. She was sharp, socially fluent, and gifted at reading rooms. She understood what people wanted to see, and she gave it to them with practiced ease. She was the kind of person who could be charming with remarkable precision, charm that turned on fully when she needed something and cooled quickly once she had it. She graduated from Arizona State with a degree in marketing, moved to Dallas at 26, and landed a job at a luxury real estate firm where her ability to move in high-end social spaces made her valuable almost immediately. She met Derek Hartwell at a charity fundraiser in Dallas in 2015. Derek was 40 years old, handsome in a soft-featured, well-maintained way, and operating as VP of Business Development at his mother's company, a title that had been given to him more than earned, though Derek was not entirely without ability. He was charming in his own right, sociable, well-liked in the circles he moved in. He was also, by the accounts of people who knew him well during that period, not someone who thought very hard about the gap between the person he presented himself to be and the person he actually was. He had grown up in wealth. He had grown up insulated. He had grown up around a mother who was extraordinary and had simply never figured out how to fully see that. He saw Brianna at that fundraiser, was drawn to her immediately, and within 3 months they were together. Within 8 months, he had proposed. The engagement was beautiful, the wedding was expensive, and Gloria Hartwell sat in the front pew of that church and watched her son marry a woman she had not yet made up her mind about, but was watching very, very carefully. In the early months of the marriage, Brianna's behavior toward the Hartwell Industrial staff was something that could be described, charitably, as indifferent. She did not interact with employees below a certain level. She did not acknowledge the cleaning staff, the cafeteria workers, the security guards who held doors open for her. They were, to her, invisible not out of malice, at first, but out of a deeply conditioned belief that certain people simply did not require acknowledgement. But indifference, left unchecked, has a way of curdling into something uglier over time. And by the second year of the marriage, what Brianna was doing inside that building could no longer be called indifference. Multiple staff members would later describe a clear and consistent pattern of behavior that went well beyond ignoring people. Brianna would set her coffee cup down on a surface that a custodian had just wiped and watch them clean it again without looking at them. She once knocked a stack of papers off a counter near the reception desk and kept walking without breaking stride, glancing over her shoulder and saying only, "Someone should get that." She regularly walked through the lobby during morning rush and cut directly in front of the security sign-in process because she considered herself exempt from procedures she felt were designed for other people. But it was what she did to Donna Field specifically that people who worked in that building still talk about. Donna's team was responsible for the ground floor and the main atrium, the highest visibility area in the building, the one that clients and executives passed through every day. She ran a tight, professional operation. Her floors were spotless. Her team was organized and disciplined. She had never, in 19 years, received a formal complaint about her work or her team's work. And yet Brianna seemed to have identified Donna as a particular target. Not with any single dramatic act, not at first, but through a sustained and grinding campaign of small humiliations that, taken one by one, each seemed minor, but accumulated into something that wore on Donna in a way that was anything but minor. Brianna once walked the length of a freshly mopped hallway that Donna's team had just finished, looked at her phone, and said out loud to the person beside her, without making eye contact with Donna, "I don't know why they can't just do this properly." Donna was standing 6 feet away. She heard every word. On another occasion, Brianna was walking with a group of visiting clients through the main atrium, and Donna was nearby with her cart. Brianna stopped, turned to the group with a bright smile, and said, gesturing in Donna's direction without looking at her, "We keep the help out of sight during client hours." Someone clearly didn't get the memo. The clients laughed nervously. Donna stood there holding the handle of her cart and did not move. She told Raymond Okafor later, during the formal meeting that followed the gala, that what she remembered most about that moment was not the words themselves, but the fact that Brianna never once looked at her when she said them. Not before, not after. As if Donna were not a person standing right there. As if she were a piece of equipment that had been left in an inconvenient spot. Donna said she walked to the parking lot after her shift that day and sat in her car for 40 minutes before she could drive. She said she was not crying because she was sad. She said she was crying because she was angry, and she had nowhere to put the anger. And after 19 years of giving everything to that building and that company, she could not understand how another human being could look at her, or rather, look through her like that. She had almost quit that same week. She had typed out a resignation letter at her kitchen table on a Wednesday night and read it back to herself twice. She did not send it. The reason she did not send it, she later said, was because of Gloria. Not because of anything dramatic Gloria had done, but because on one of her quiet visits not long before that, Gloria had sat down with Donna in that ground floor break room, the same one where they had first met, and Donna had mentioned, carefully, that things had been hard recently. She had not said why. She had not named anyone. She had just said it had been a rough stretch. And Gloria had put down her coffee cup and looked at Donna directly and said, "You matter here. More than you know. Don't let anyone take that from you." She did not know what had happened. She did not know what Brianna had done. But Donna held on to those words like a lifeline, and she stayed. And that decision to stay would turn out to be one of the most important things Donna Fields ever did. Gloria, for her part, was not blind to what was happening. She had seen small things during her visits that concerned her. A tone of voice from the executive corridor. A way that certain staff members stiffened when they heard particular footsteps in the hall. The quiet, practiced way that employees below a certain level seemed to make themselves smaller when Brianna was nearby. Gloria had grown up around enough power to know what it looked like when someone was abusing a smaller version of it. But she was also a mother, and she loved her son, deeply and imperfectly the way all parents love their children, and she did not want to destroy his marriage on the basis of what she suspected rather than what she knew. She told Raymond at one point, during one of their many private conversations about the situation, that she was waiting. He asked her what she was waiting for. She said she was waiting for clarity. Raymond, who had known Gloria for over 30 years, understood what that meant. It meant she was building a case. Not a legal one, not yet. A human one. She was gathering the full picture before she acted. And that was very much how Gloria Hartwell had always operated. She did not move fast. She moved right. By the summer before the gala, Gloria had made approximately 4 unannounced visits to the Houston headquarters. During each one, she had observed something that added to the picture she was building. On one visit, she had personally witnessed Brianna walk through a group of maintenance workers who were moving equipment through the lobby and say, audibly enough for multiple people to hear, "Can we get this done?" when actual employees aren't in the building? On another visit, she had found Donna in the break room on the ground floor alone during what should have been a lunch break, and Donna had seemed quieter than usual. Gloria had not pushed, but she had noticed. She always noticed. And with each visit, the picture became clearer, and the decision she was eventually going to have to make became more obvious to her. She simply had not yet found the moment that made it undeniable. That moment was coming. She did not know yet that it would happen in front of 200 people. She did not know yet that it would involve a glass of wine. She did not know that the moment she had been building toward in quiet, patient documentation over the course of a year and a half would arrive so publicly and so completely that there would be no question left about what had been happening or what needed to happen next. But life rarely announces itself in advance. It simply arrives. October 14th was a Thursday. The Hartwell Industrial Annual Stakeholder Gala was the company's most significant public event of the year. It was held every fall in the main atrium of the Houston headquarters, a space Gloria had personally designed to feel welcoming and open, full of natural light and clean lines, the kind of space that said something about who the company believed itself to be. The guest list that year included 200 people, investors, clients, city officials, board members, and regional partners from across the country. Donna Fields and her team had arrived at the building at 5 in the morning to begin preparations. They set up the room, arranged the tables, polished the floors, coordinated with the catering staff, and handled every logistical detail that nobody ever thinks about, but everyone would notice if it went wrong. By 4 in the afternoon, the atrium looked extraordinary. Donna stood at the edge of it and looked at what her team had built and felt, briefly, that specific pride that comes from work done well. Gloria arrived at the building at 4 o'clock, not through the main entrance, through the loading dock, the way she always did on her quiet visits. She wore a gray work shirt, dark trousers, and a plain cap that she had pushed her silver hair under. She carried a mop. She wore no jewelry and no name tag and nothing that would identify her as anything other than a contract worker making sure the floors were ready for the evening. Raymond Okafor had called her twice that day, asking her not to do this. He said the gala was too high profile. He said there were too many people who knew her face. She told him that was exactly the point. If anyone who mattered was going to show their true character that evening, she wanted to be in position to see it. Raymond told her she was going to give him a heart attack before the year was out. She told him to stop worrying and drink some water. She found Donna near the buffet table at around 4:30, and the two women talked quietly for a few minutes, keeping the conversation brief in case anyone was watching. Donna said later that Gloria had seemed unusually calm that evening. Not the calm of someone who is at peace, but the calm of someone who has already made up their mind. Gloria did not tell Donna why she was there. She rarely explained her visits. She simply moved through the building with the quiet, unhurried attention of someone who saw everything and said very little. The guests began arriving at 6. The atrium filled steadily, voices, laughter, the sound of glasses being lifted and set down, the particular music of a room full of people performing their best versions of themselves. Derek Hartwell arrived at 6:15 with Brianna on his arm. She was dressed in a deep burgundy gown, her hair styled, her smile practiced and bright. She moved through the room with the easy confidence of a woman who had decided this was her stage. She worked the guests, introduced herself to people she had never met, laughed at the right moments, and positioned herself physically and socially as a co-host of an event she had nothing to do with organizing. Several people in the room noticed it. One board member said afterward that there was something about the way Brianna moved that evening that made him faintly uncomfortable, though he could not have articulated exactly why at the time. At approximately 6:47 in the evening, Brianna made her way toward the buffet table. The atrium was loud with conversation. The lights were warm. The evening was, by all surface appearances, going beautifully. Brianna was holding a glass of Cabernet Sauvignon and scanning the room with the expression of someone who is taking inventory of everything around them and deciding what belongs and what does not. That is when she saw Gloria, an old woman with silver hair tucked under a plain cap, standing near the edge of the buffet table in work clothes, quietly adjusting a tablecloth that had shifted slightly out of position. Brianna's expression, according to multiple guests who were watching, shifted in a way that was very specific and very deliberate. It was not confused. It was not uncertain. It was decided. She crossed the space between herself and Gloria with the measured pace of someone who has already determined what they are going to do before they get there. She tapped Gloria on the shoulder, not gently, hard enough that several people nearby noticed the motion. Then she said, clearly and loud enough for the people immediately around them to hear, "You're embarrassing yourself. Get away from the guest table. This isn't a job for someone your age anyway." Gloria turned and looked at her. She did not move. She did not speak. She simply looked at Brianna with an expression that people who witnessed it later described in different ways. Some said she looked like she was waiting for something. Some said she looked almost sorry. One person said she looked like a woman who had just seen everything she needed to see. Brianna held her gaze for a moment, and then, in front of 200 people, she raised her glass of Cabernet Sauvignon and poured it, deliberately, unhurriedly, and completely, over Gloria's head. The wine ran down through her silver hair and onto her gray work shirt and dripped from the brim of her cap onto the polished floor that Donna's team had worked since 5 in the morning to make perfect. Brianna made a sound that witnesses described as a short, satisfied laugh. Then she said, loudly, "Maybe now you'll learn where you belong." And she turned to walk away. What she walked into was a room that had gone absolutely silent. Not the sudden silence of a dropped glass or a loud sound that startles a crowd. A deep, spreading, deliberate silence that started near the buffet table and moved outward across the atrium like a tide going out. The kind of silence that happens when 200 people understand at the same moment that they have just witnessed something they cannot unhear. Brianna took 2 steps and felt it. She stopped. She looked at the faces nearest to her, and she saw something in them that was not embarrassment on the old woman's behalf. It was something else, something that registered in her expression as the first crack in the certainty she had walked in with. Because half the people in that atrium knew Gloria Hartwell's face. They had sat across from her in boardrooms. They had signed contracts with her. They had shaken her hand at events exactly like this one. And the other half of the room was watching the half that knew, and understanding from their faces alone that something had just gone catastrophically wrong. Raymond Okafor had been standing near the bar at the far side of the atrium when it happened. He had seen it. He set down his glass immediately and walked forward with the measured pace of a man who has spent 30 years managing high-stakes situations without showing panic in his face. He reached Gloria, removed the handkerchief from his jacket pocket, and placed it around her shoulders. Then he turned to face the room. He did not raise his voice. He spoke clearly and with the kind of composure that made the silence in the room feel even more complete. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to take a moment to formally introduce someone many of you already know. This is Gloria Hartwell, founder, chief executive officer, and sole majority shareholder of the Hartwell Industrial Group." He paused for exactly 1 second. Then he said, "It is her building we are standing in this evening. It is her company we are here to celebrate. And it has been an honor, as always, to stand beside her." The silence that followed those words was the kind that a person carries with them for years. Brianna did not move for what multiple witnesses described as a very long time. One guest said it felt like watching someone's operating system crash in real time, the face going still, the processing visible, the inability to produce a response that matched the situation. Derek had been across the room when it happened. He had seen the wine poured. He had not understood immediately what he was watching. But when he heard Raymond's words, he turned toward his mother, and the expression on his face, by the accounts of people standing near him, was not just shock. It was a specific, quiet devastation, the look of a man watching something irreversible happen and knowing, in real time, that he should have prevented it a long time ago. Gloria stood in the center of the room with wine drying in her silver hair and looked at nothing in particular for a moment. Then she straightened her shoulders in a motion so precise and so unhurried that several people in the room later said it was the most powerful thing they had ever watched a person do. She handed the mop to a nearby staff member, said something quietly to Raymond that nobody else heard, and then spent the next 40 minutes at that gala doing exactly what she had planned to do before any of this happened. She spoke with investors. She greeted board members by name. She thanked the catering team and the setup crew and the people at the front door. She did not clean herself up until much later in the evening. She did not ask for anyone to be removed. She did not make a scene. She simply continued to exist in that room with a composure so complete that more than one person present said afterward that watching her do it was one of the most quietly remarkable things they had ever seen. The story left the building before the event was over. By the time the last guests were being seen out, 3 separate people had made phone calls. By midnight, the details were circulating in Houston business circles. By the following morning, it had spread further. There was no viral video, no footage, because phones had been asked to be kept away during the formal portion of the gala. But the eyewitness accounts were detailed and consistent. And in the absence of footage, those accounts traveled faster than a recording might have, because they carried the particular authority of people who had been standing right there and could not believe what they had seen. Derek Hartwell, by every account, spent the night of the gala in a state of complete devastation. Multiple people who saw him during the final hour of the event described him as a man who had aged 10 years and 40 minutes. He had tried to speak to his mother before she left. Gloria had been gracious, brief, and said nothing about what had happened. She had kissed him on the cheek and told him to get some sleep. She had said nothing to Brianna at all. That silence, Derek would later say, was the most frightening thing he had experienced in his adult life. He knew his mother well enough to know that silence was not weakness. Silence, for Gloria Hartwell, was preparation. By 9 o'clock the following morning, Gloria was in Raymond Okafor's office. She had not slept. She was wearing her regular clothes, her silver hair pinned up the way she always wore it, and she was carrying a yellow legal pad with handwriting on the first several pages. Raymond said she sat down, set the legal pad on his desk, and said, "I'm ready to move." He asked her what she wanted to do. She said she wanted to do several things, and she wanted to do them correctly and permanently, and she was going to need him to help her do all of them at once. Raymond said yes before she finished the sentence. He had been ready for this conversation for a long time. What followed over the next several weeks was a process that Raymond Okafor later described as the most methodical and comprehensive set of decisions he had seen a client execute in over 3 decades of law practice. Gloria did not act from anger, though she felt it. She acted from a clarity she had been developing for a year and a half. She began by walking Raymond through everything she had documented over the course of her unannounced visits, the incidents she had witnessed personally, the staff members she had spoken to informally, the patterns she had observed. She had dates. She had locations. She had, in some cases, names of other people who had been present. It was not a casual list. It was the kind of careful, organized documentation that comes from someone who has been running a major business for 4 decades and knows exactly how to build a record that will hold. And then, within 48 hours of the meeting in Raymond's office, something began happening inside Hartwell Industrial that neither of them had fully anticipated. Employees started coming forward on their own, not in dramatic or coordinated ways. Quietly, individually, through the company's human resources system and through direct contact with Raymond's office once word spread that he was collecting accounts. A security guard who had worked the morning shift for 6 years submitted a formal written statement describing a specific incident in which Brianna had snapped her fingers at him from across the lobby to summon him, the way someone might call a dog, and then told him that if he couldn't move faster, he should find work more suited to his pace. A woman who had worked the cafeteria breakfast line for 11 years described being told, during a morning rush, that the coffee she had prepared for a cart near the executive elevator tasted like something they served at gas stations, and that she should be embarrassed to serve it to people who had real jobs. A maintenance worker described being ordered by Brianna to redo an entire section of hallway he had just finished, not because there was anything wrong with it, but because she said she had walked past it and it didn't look right to her, and he had stood there and redone it for 45 minutes while she watched. One by one the accounts came in, each one specific, each one with a date and a location, and in many cases corroborating witnesses, each one describing a pattern so consistent and so sustained that when Raymond laid them all out in sequence on his conference table, the picture they formed was one of the clearest things he had seen in a very long career. But the account that Raymond said stayed with him longest, the one that he described as the hardest to read, without setting the papers down, was Donna Fields. Donna came to Raymond's office on a Wednesday afternoon 3 weeks after the gala and spent 3 hours going through what she had experienced over the prior 2 years. She did not have a formal log. She was not a lawyer, but she had a memory shaped by 19 years of paying close attention to everything around her, and what she described was precise and detailed and utterly without exaggeration. She described the hallway comment in front of the clients. She described being made to feel invisible at events she had spent all morning preparing. She described the day Brianna had told her, in the presence of 2 other staff members, to make sure her cart was not visible from the main atrium during visitor hours because it was, and she quoted this directly, not the kind of image the company needs to project. Donna said she had nodded and moved the cart and gone to the supply room and stood by herself for 10 minutes until she could trust her face not to show what she was feeling. She described the letter she had typed at her kitchen table and never sent. She described sitting in her car for 40 minutes in the parking lot. She described nearly walking away from 19 years because she had run out of ways to absorb what was being done to her without it touching something essential and irreplaceable in her sense of herself. And then she described the day Gloria had sat across from her in the break room and told her she mattered. She did not know it was the owner of the company. She had thought it was a contract worker. And the fact that a woman she believed to be a contract worker had looked her in the eye and told her she mattered had been enough to make her stay. Raymond said that when Donna finished, there was a long silence in the room, and that he had needed a moment before he could respond professionally. He is not a man given to visible emotion. That afternoon was an exception. 3 weeks after the gala, Raymond Okafor sent formal meeting invitations to Derek and Brianna Hartwell. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday morning in a conference room at Raymond's firm. Gloria was already seated when they arrived. The room was quiet. On the table were 3 documents. Raymond walked them through each one in order. The first document was an amendment to the structure of Gloria's business trust and estate planning, one that had been in preparation for nearly 2 years and had been finalized the week after the gala. The amendment restructured Derek's position and compensation within Hartwell Industrial. His VP title was retained, but the conditions of his ongoing role were now formalized and explicit. His continued position required demonstrated leadership by a standard that was now defined in writing. The standard included, among other things, what the document described as consistent maintenance of a workplace culture in which all employees are treated with dignity regardless of their role within the organization. Derek read the relevant passages without speaking. He set the document down. He looked at his mother. She looked back at him. The second document was a formal notice of revocation of Brianna Cole Hartwell's access to all Hartwell industrial facilities, events, vendor relationships, and internal systems, effective immediately, with cause. Attached to the notice was a summary of the documented incidents collected by Raymond's office, not all of them, but enough. Enough that when Brianna read the first page and understood what it contained, she stopped reading and put the pages face down on the table. The cause was documented. It was witnessed. It was comprehensive, and it was permanent. There was no negotiation language in the document. There was no appeals process. There was no phrasing that left room for a different outcome. Raymond had drafted it that way deliberately and with Gloria's full approval. The third document was a retirement package for Donna Fields. Full pension, comprehensive health benefits for life, a formal letter of recognition for 19 years of exemplary service, and a personal note from Gloria Hartwell that was not part of the official documentation but was folded inside the envelope alongside it. Raymond did not read the contents of that note at the meeting. He did not need to. He delivered it to Donna separately, in person, the following afternoon. Donna read it at her kitchen table that evening. She later told a family member that she read it 4 times, that she cried before she finished the first reading, and that by the 4th reading she was not crying anymore. She was just sitting quietly with it, feeling something she said she did not have the right word for, but that felt like being seen completely by another person in a way she had not experienced in a very long time. Brianna said very little during the meeting. At the end, as she was gathering herself to leave, she stopped at the door and turned toward Gloria. The room was quiet, she said, in a voice that several people present described as the first unguarded thing they had ever heard from her. "I didn't know who you were." Gloria looked at her for a long moment. Then she said 8 words. She said, "That was never the point, Brianna. That was never the point." Brianna did not respond. She left. The door closed. Raymond said that after she was gone, the room stayed quiet for a full minute, and nobody seemed to want to be the first one to speak. Derek remained in the room after Brianna had left. He sat across from his mother with his hands on the conference table and said that he was sorry. Not a produced, managed sorry. A quiet, broken one. The kind that does not come with explanations attached because the person saying it understands that explanations are beside the point right now. Gloria looked at her son for a long time. She said she loved him. She said she had always loved him. She said that what she had done in this room today, she had done not to punish him, but to protect something she had spent her entire life building. Something that was larger than any one person in it, including herself. She said that the character of a company was measured by how the person with the most power treated the person with the least. She said she had believed that her whole life. She said she had tried to build a company that reflected it. And she said she could not, in good conscience, allow what had been happening in her building to continue for another day. Derek nodded. He did not argue. He sat with it. And then, because there was nothing left to say, both of them sat in that quiet room for a while longer, the way family sometimes does when things are too big for words and too real to walk away from quickly. Donna Fields retired in December of that year. She cleaned out her locker on a Friday afternoon and said goodbye to her team in the break room on the ground floor, the same one where she had first sat down next to a woman she thought was a contract worker and asked how she was settling in. Her team had decorated the room. Someone had brought a cake. There were cards. There were, by multiple accounts, a significant number of tears. Donna was not one for dramatic speeches. She said what she always said, that she was grateful, that she was proud of the work they had done together, and that she hoped whoever came after her would love the building the way she did. She said the building deserved to be loved. Then she picked up her bag and walked out through the lobby, through the main entrance, and into the afternoon sun. She called it the best exit she had ever made. In the months that followed, Derek Hartwell filed for divorce from Brianna. He has said publicly, in the limited interviews he has given since, that the evening of the gala was the moment his understanding of himself and his life shifted in a way that could not be undone. He said watching his mother stand in that atrium with wine in her hair, and not flinch, and not break, and not stop being who she was watching her simply continue made him understand for the first time what real strength actually looked like. He said it made him realize he had been performing a version of himself that was not strong in any real sense. He said he was working on that. He said he had a long way to go. He said he was glad he finally understood the direction. Gloria Hartwell gave one interview in the spring following the gala. It was her first in over a decade. The interviewer asked her the question that everyone wanted answered: why had she waited so long? Why had she continued those visits and continued watching and continued documenting rather than acting sooner? Gloria was quiet for a moment. Then she said that she had waited because she believed in giving people time to show you who they are. She said that a single incident could be a bad day. A pattern was a character. She said she had wanted to see the full character before she made a permanent decision. She was asked whether she had any regrets. She said she regretted that her people, particularly Donna, had carried that weight for as long as they had. She said that was the thing she would carry longest from all of it. Not the wine in her hair. Not the 200 witnesses. Not any of the things that happened afterward. The thing she would carry was the image of Donna Fields typing a resignation letter at her kitchen table and not sending it, because she had decided to hold on a little longer, and what a fragile and enormous thing that decision had been. The Hartwell Industrial Group today has a company-wide policy formally titled the Hartwell Dignity Standard. It applies to every person who enters any Hartwell facility, from the largest corporate headquarters to the smallest regional operation. It applies regardless of title, tenure, or relationship to the company. It states, in the first paragraph, that every individual present in a Hartwell facility will be treated with full dignity and respect, and that this expectation exists without exception and without hierarchy. It is enforced. It is taken seriously. It carries Gloria Hartwell's name because she insisted on it. Raymond told her she did not need to attach her name to a policy document. She told him she wanted it there. She said that if her name was on the building, it should be on the values too. Otherwise, the building was just a building. Gloria Hartwell built a $4 billion company from a rented warehouse and a second-hand Blazer. She drove herself to work in a 5-year-old Buick. She ate lunch in the company cafeteria. She learned the names of every person who worked for her because she believed, the way her mother had told her to believe, that nobody's dignity was conditional on their position. And then one evening, she stood in the middle of her own atrium with red wine dripping from her silver hair and said 8 words that said everything. That was never the point. That was never the point. The point was never who she was. The point was who you were when you thought nobody was watching. The point was the mop. The point was the gray work shirt. The point was 19 years of a woman who loved her building and her team and showed up every day and deserved, at the absolute minimum, to be seen. The point was always that. It was only ever that. Here is what I want to ask you before you go. Think honestly. Have you ever walked past someone doing a hard job and said nothing? Not even a thank you. Not even a glance. Have you ever made someone feel invisible because you were moving too fast or thinking too hard about yourself to notice that they were right there in front of you? Doing something difficult, being someone real? I have. And this story made me sit with that for a long time. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely read them. Tell me what part of this story hit you hardest. Tell me what you would have done if you had been in that atrium. And if this story meant something to you, hit that like button. It does more for this channel than you might think. Subscribe if you are not already, because what is coming next on this channel is a story about a woman who discovered that the family she had given everything to had been quietly taking everything from her for over a decade. And what she did about it is one of the most extraordinary things I have ever had the chance to research and tell. You do not want to miss it. I will see you there.